remember that being all that stuff.
Are we on? Oh, okay, great. All right, we'll call the Hood River City Council meeting for September 27th to order. Just remind people about to turn down or off your cell phone. And I am going to do the land acknowledgement, and then we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. This is extremely poignant because I'm going to read the Indigenous Peoples Day proclamation later on in the meeting. But as we meet tonight, let us all remember that today we are stewards of land that has been home to Indigenous peoples for thousands of years before the recent arrival of the European heritage shamanic culture. We honor this land's ancestors as we go about our business today. Okay, we'll have the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Do we have any business from the audience? I don't think we had anyone signed up. We did receive one letter that was really business from the audience from Megan Ramey. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone received that and was able to look at that. Okay. She was talking about National Bike and Walk to School Day, which is coming up October 6th. And explaining to us about the Safe Routes to School and a grant application that she has submitted, and actually won for $20,000 to help expand the bike train, the walking bus, incorporate walking and rolling safety education into PE classes, and partner with Ants and Bike Buddies to refurbish used bikes. So lots of great work she's been working on with the Safe Routes to Schools and getting kids to school biking and walking. All right, we have a presentation this evening regarding Community Health Improvement Plan by Suzanne Cross. Good evening, Suzanne.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. Thank you for having me. Very cool to see the letter from Megan Ramey. She was involved in the process I'm about to share with you. So let's see. I'm gonna share my screen. Then I'm going to do that. Okay. So, gosh, I don't know how many months ago, my coworker, Jenny Anglin, came to talk about the community health assessment that was being done 2019, kind of finished up in 2020. I'm Suzanne Cross. I'm with the Columbia Gorge Health Council. I'm a senior program manager. I know many of you. It's been a while since I've been here. I'm happy to be here. So I'm here to talk about the next step, which is the Community Health Improvement Plan. I'm only going to take up about 10 minutes of your time. I just wanted to share with you on this first page, and this should be also in your packet. I'm going to get back to this top bit in a bit after I kind of give you the overview. So just a reminder, the community health assessment and then the sequential community health improvement plan is a 7-county community health improvement plan assessment and assessment. It's the 5 county regions on the Oregon side. So that's Wasco, Hood River, Sherman, Gillum, and Wheeler, and then Klickitat and Skamania on the Washington side. And we had kind of 5 principles of design that we set out through this process. So that was to elevate community voices, to create authentic engagement opportunities, to prioritize equity, to apply a trauma-informed lens, and to focus on big program and systematic changes. And I'm going to jump to the next page because that kind of talks about our process. So the Community Advisory Council is the board that kind of leads the process, but it's a hugely collective process. Community Advisory Council is made up of, as voting members, more than 50% or OHP, Oregon Health Plan consumers, as well as others. And then at a large level, over 162 people are on our communications And we usually get about 41 people at every meeting representing sectors throughout the gorge. So transportation, housing, healthcare, food industry. And they all attend the meeting and kind of help guide this process. So in the community health assessment that Jenny came and spoke to previously, that was 17 cohort organizations, mostly public health and healthcare, that kind of buy into supporting that process. But then on top of that, we have 180 individuals that represented 37 community focus groups that we went out in the community to gather more input on what the community health assessment said was our 7-county region priorities. So we then worked with the 60+ organizations who attend our community advisory council and defined strategies and goals to meet those priorities. And I'm going to go back to this page and go over what those priorities are. So children and youth is the first one, and underneath that is youth safety and early childhood development and childcare, housing, transportation, food, healthcare services, and you can see the list of those. And also in there is, besides the traditional dental, primary, and behavioral health, is also health coverage, plus promotion and prevention. And then social connection and communication, which is a sense of community, as well as collaboration and information sharing, and then physical activity and the outdoors. And the city of Hood River was involved as well in this process. And there's 2 priorities that I'm going to go over that are specifically the city of Hood River is named in that process. And that was with Rachel Fuller, that we kind of said, hey, here's the goals. Which ones do you feel the city of Hood River you're involved in? And then we kind of list it out, and you'll see how that developed in a second here. So again, it's a huge document. I think it's 185 pages, including the appendices. At the bottom here, it says visit cghealthcouncil.org. That's where you can read the full document if you're interested. And there's a version of it here. It's been cleaned up for plain language reading, so it's not too hard to read. The overview has been translated into Spanish, although the 185-page document is still in translation. And then let's see. I guess I'll kind of go over. So where we are now, before I go to the next piece, is again, the group defined the goals and the strategies. The 75 key stakeholder organizations that are listed on here really honed in on defining that strategy, listing some data points to measure, defining the goal, listing some data points to measure, and then defining what steps we were going to do to get us to those goals. And there's 35 of them. So this is the Spanish version. On the next page, the first one is the housing goal. And I think after I present this briefly, you'll get an idea of it. Quite obvious why you all are listed on these 2 goals based on all the things that you're working on. So one of the things that we did is define what housing meant. So housing meant people can gain access and afford safe housing. People don't worry about losing their housing, and people spend less than 30% of their income on housing. And then the actual goal itself is for people who experience homelessness or who are housing burdened, we will increase access to safe shelter, housing supports like shelter, housing, home improvements, or rent support, with giving a special focus to communities of color, people with mental health or substance use challenges, and veterans. And then you can read in your packet, there's some background information. If a particular goal was impacted by COVID, we added that information. We added what other goals in the plan this goal is connected to. Then there's some data points, the ones that I mentioned. The first one is what the current state data points are. Then there's a future state data points, but the important piece is the strategies piece. And I think, again, in this list of strategies, you can see where the city council and what the things that you're working on intersect. Particularly increasing lower price point housing supply by 3% in 3 years. expanding staffing programs for homeless outreach, listing homeless veterans by name in the region, establishing a veteran leadership team, increasing partners in a unified system to wrap around those experiencing housing challenges, coordinating outreach through culturally specific providers to communities of color, and expanding permanent supportive housing options in each county in the Gorge. And then I tried to, in the document, these are on kind of one page or kind of flow over into pages. So I had to kind of put it in snippets to get it on a PowerPoint for you. But in each goal, there's the list of strategic or key stakeholders. And you can see the city of Hood River and the city of the Dalles as an example are listed in here. And then lastly, the other one that the city of Hood River is listed on is under physical activity in the outdoors. It's particularly goal number 4. And that goal is create improvements to the built environments in Hood River and Wasco counties. And this is where Megan Ramey comes in. This is to improve access to the outdoors. Built environment means all physical parts of where we live, work, and play, like buildings, streets, open spaces, etc. And again, some background information, what goals this one is also connected to, some data points. And then you can see here, strategies were, example, expanding walking trails, such as the Indian Creek Trail. Let's see, some of these are all impacting the Dalles. Also in Hood River is continuing the swim or X passes for Oregon Health Plan members so that they can use the pool for free. And then the last one is the ODOT safe routes to school for Hood River will prioritize infrastructure improvements. And you can see the city of Hood River is listed in there. So that's my overview, and I'll take any questions if you have them.
Great, thank you, Suzanne.
Sure.
We're glad to be a part of the whole big picture here. So, counselors, do you guys have any questions specific?
I'll ask a question.
You have a question, Tim? Okay, go ahead, Tim.
Thanks so much, Suzanne. That was a great presentation. You guys are doing great stuff.
Thanks.
So with respect to kind of like going forward and implementing these strategies, what's the plan there?
Good question. Number one plan is to get it in some sort of shared environment where we can all contribute our data, and it's more of a live process versus a document on paper. So that's a number one step. Simultaneously, a perfect example is Megan Ramey's work. This work is going on. So at the same time, all the organizations, all the 67 organizations that were part of this grandiose project are working on their pieces and kind of on some regular cadence. My hope is to have the technology piece first, and then we start collecting the data, but at some regular cadence, we'll be collecting the input and the activities and looking back at these data points, the future state ones in particular, to say, how are we doing? So on, on this physical activity in the outdoors, it would be kind of this future state. So as an example, have we expanded the Indian Creek, the many miles, how close are we, and that kind of stuff. This plan goes from 2020 to 2025. Yeah, so we've got that long to kind of get to hopefully our goals. And then the city of Hood River with your new development and everything going on there, slowly as things increase, we'll be measuring those data points as well.
Yeah, that's great. Being able to track the progress and kind of like having a scoreboard or metric to kind of judge progress. Fantastic.
Yeah, there's Klamath County has a beautiful example called healthyklamath.org of having kind of a live living and breathing document where different partners can share their work and assess their achievements towards the goals. And so my hope is we can create something like that.
Yeah, thanks.
Sure.
Thank you. Gladys?
I have a question. Thank you, Suzanne, for being here and for presenting today. Would you find it helpful to have someone, whether that's a counselor, mayor, or city manager, who would be attending these meetings just to be a better partner? I mean, what do you need from us moving forward?
Good question. The Community Advisory Council meetings are almost always open to the public. There's 11 meetings a year. every quarter, there are voting member only meetings. So like this one in October is voting member only meetings. But we always welcome, we would love a presence from the city of Hood River there. They're generally the third Monday of every month from 3 to 5, unless they fall on a holiday, and then they're the fourth Monday. And they're available on our website, and I'm happy to send the new manager I think actually Rachel was on our list, so at least she got our materials for the meetings, and I'm happy to do that as well if you all want me to do that.
Can we do that just so that folks have an opportunity to just join in and observe?
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
They're a public meeting, the more the merrier, for sure. Thanks for asking, Gladys.
yeah, you could just send it to our city manager, interim city manager, and then he could forward that out to all of us too. Well,
Okay, great. Yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
idea. Other questions, anyone? Eric?
Suzanne, good to see you. Thanks for coming. I've heard some people talk about a vision for a short-term mental health support facility in Wasco County, a new one. Sort of like Deschutes County has one. We kind of are lacking that here. I wondered if your group was part of that at all. And
Yes, it is in here as one of the goals. I can't remember which one off the top of my head because there's 35 of them. It's absolutely, it's in here. The Health Council, the Columbia Ridge Health Council sponsored the first part of it, getting them to the point of planning. I believe that Mid-Columbia Medical Center has taken over a big piece of the planning now, but we have community advisory council members who are voting members who sit on our group, also on that group, who have a particular interest in substance use and mental health. So we're definitely involved and hope that they're successful. Yeah.
Well, anything I can do personally, you want to reach me.
Thank you. I will say, I appreciate you bringing that up, Eric. And behavioral health is at the absolute forefront of every meeting and the priorities for the Community Advisory Council. Particularly behavioral health for people who are Spanish speaking. There's a real crisis in our region, but generally there's a lack of behavioral health services for people in the region. And it's got a number of goals.
Other questions? I don't see any.
Okay, thanks so much. Appreciate the time.
Thank you,
Stop
Suzanne. All right, that's our only presentation this evening. I'll open the work session. And we don't have anything on our work session. Is there any additions to that?
No additions or corrections, nothing scheduled for the work session today.
Okay, so we will adjourn the work session and go into regular council meeting at 6:20. Any additions or corrections to that one?
No, Mayor, there are not.
Okay. Consent agenda, we've got several things on that. Does anyone need to abstain or ask for anything to be pulled off of that consent agenda? Oh, okay. If there's no questions, do I have a motion or just?
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
I second. Jessica has made a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented, and Gladys has made a second. All those in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstentions? Chair votes aye. Regular business items, technology purchase.
Thank you, Your Honor. We have the city's IT manager, Bill Bond, here to present this item.
Good evening. Are you ready to talk tech?
Yes.
Well, tech is my favorite topic. So if I start sounding like a teacher from a Charlie Brown TV special, then stop me and I'll rephrase because I want you to understand what I'm saying, okay? Hopefully I didn't date myself too much with that analogy. Okay, tonight I'm here to ask you to authorize the city manager to enter into a purchase to buy servers, storage area network, which is called a SAN, and network switches. These were two different projects, but I combined them for certain requirements and for efficiency. The requirements are the server and storage area network need a core switch to connect themselves, and that core switch is connected to all the switches around the city. And I wanted the servers to be installed in that environment. So that's why I combined them. a little background. The servers that we currently have were purchased in 2014. And they pretty much are at the end of their life. For the last year and a half, I've had Radcom strongly suggest that we replace our servers. And for a year and a half, I've had other priorities, which that was not part of them. So I spent the year and a half giving these as much life as I could for this time period, but they are at the end of their life. They're experiencing extreme slowdowns. By slowdowns, I mean applications will actually crawl and actually come to a stop for a matter of 3 to 5 minutes, and then all of a sudden start again. Just the other day, I was managing one of the servers, and what normally is a click and move on, I clicked and I actually watched the clock for 2 minutes, which is nerve-wracking because if I can't manage the servers, then we're in trouble. So anyway, they're slow and causing more problems. Besides that, their capacity, they're just at capacity. So during this time, we haven't been able to install any new technology that we need. So we're at capacity. The switches are very similar with the added use of computers and internet, all that. We need more bandwidth. They just can't, they're at capacity too, which is causing slowdowns. So that's slow, plus the server is causing a system-wide slowdown. What we want to do to solve this is purchase 2 new servers and attach them. I mentioned the storage area network or the SAN, which is a disk array. So both of those servers are connected to the disks, and that has a whole bunch of advantages technology-wise for virtual servers and whatnot, which I won't get into unless you ask. But they're connected to the core switching, which runs that system. As I said, the core switches are connected around the city. What that will do is the servers will be fast, the network will be fast, our applications will work, we won't get the slowdowns, and so things will operate better. Plus, the system that we're buying has a lot of capacity, so we can install things like next generation remote workforce systems, enhanced backup systems, and it is a fantastic infrastructure for a new IP phone system, which is next on the IT project list. So we sent out for a request for quote to 4 vendors. 3 of them responded. We chose Presidio because they had the lowest quote, but besides that, they showed phenomenal pre-sales engineering and understanding of our project. And if you look on the next page, I included a brief summary of the company, and you'll see that they've been around for quite some time. They have a great depth and breadth of knowledge of this topic. And so we feel they will be a very good vendor for this project. The project itself will probably take a primary focus of IT for about 6 months, then smaller projects echoing from that for about a year. So, any questions?
Sounds really good.
I tried to not go into virtual servers and all that stuff, though I wanted to.
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Thanks, Bill. Could you help show like where this fits into the IT plan that, you know, is a couple of years old now? I mean, these are things that were anticipated then, and are we checking, you know, getting the big picture milestones and on the big picture budget, or have we diverged from what we had talked about with the IT strategy?
I currently reviewed the IT strategy, and we are clipping right along with it and following it very closely. Little delayed because of COVID, but that put us back a little bit. Budget questions would have to go to Will. I think we're right on track, and as I mentioned in there, there's sufficient extra to cover what we need for this.
Yeah, for budget questions, it was in the packet that this was 20 or 30K more than what we thought it was going to be, but there's budgeted contingency in the admin fund. For the larger question of are we on a sustainable path? Absolutely. The city is doing very well financially and can continue and really must continue to make these IT investments in order to keep us sort of running smoothly on a day-to-day basis. You know, Luck is where planning and meets opportunity. And we were extremely lucky going into COVID that we had started on this path ahead of time. It really saved our bacon quite a bit when we had to quickly move to a remote environment. And the amount of pre-work that we had done, getting bill in place, getting infrastructure in place, set us up to kind of be future ready. And that's really 100% about what this system is about. It's 140K, which is not a small amount of money, and but it's to make us future ready, so that we have the skeletal structure that will support our IT needs for the next decade.
Great. Any questions?
Sure, I'll ask you a question.
Okay.
Thanks, Bill. To what extent does this enhance our security? Or is it a completely separate issue?
It does enhance our security without kind of going down the technobabble. It does. There's things that we couldn't do because of our capacity, but there are a number of things that will be implemented. That's why I said 6 months to a year. I'll be doing the basic, getting it running, and then that rest of the time we'll be tuning it for that exact thing is security, internal speed issues. To answer your question shortly, yes, it will increase our security quite a bit.
That seems very important.
It is quite important.
Thank you.
And I've wanted to do some of these projects all this time too.
Yes.
All right. Hey, any more questions? Motion, you ready to make a motion? Okay, go ahead.
I'm very excited. I move to authorize the city manager to enter into a purchase agreement with Presidio for the equipment listed above in an amount of $117,536.13 for equipment and up to $30,000 for as needed installation consulting.
Megan's made a motion and Tim has seconded it to authorize the city manager to enter into a purchase agreement with Presidio for the equipment listed above in an amount of $117,536.13 for the equipment and up to $30,000 for as needed installation consulting. Any additional discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Any nays? Abstention? My chair votes aye. All right,
Thank you very much.
thank you, Bill. Planning Commission selection, Dustin.
Thank you, Mayor Council. Tonight on your agenda is request and recommendation to appoint 3 members to your Planning Commission. This is a Planning Commission serves and is a citizen board. They are your appointees. There is a 7-member committee, and we cycle through opportunities and openings that come every year to keep the commission again occupied with members. And this is a citizen voluntary commission, and probably one of the most important and statutory necessary boards that you have. Within your packet, you have all the applicants and all the applications that were submitted this year. This selection process follows one that was modified in 2019, where a selection committee or a council committee discusses and has the opportunity to interview our applicants and then provide the council at large the results of those. Ultimately, you do have the opportunity to make that selection. It is council selection. And we were really grateful to have 4 really qualified members. I think that was the takeaway, is we were really pleased with the quality and willingness of these folks to serve. Within your packet, you have a recommendation to reappoint 3 of these members: Mark Frost, who's the current chair; Douglas Lapina, who is a newcomer, and then as well as Mari Petzing, who is a practicing attorney in civil rights world here in Hood River, who is talked with many times. So she familiar with you all and you with her. So we have that recommendation with some alternates, and we're looking for a motion to approve that. And I'm here for any questions that you have.
Any questions?
Megan was the council.
Tim.
Yeah. And Tim, did you have any report out from?
Other than, just to reiterate what Dustin said, I mean, all four of them seem qualified to do it. All four of them interviewed really well, but there were just three that just interviewed slightly better than the four. And so, yeah, I'm excited to, just for one, to see that people are willing to step up and serve and to see the quality of people that are getting. It's really impressive.
And that was basically my impression. That I had to, there was four, and we needed to pick three, and it was a hard decision, but the three were just slightly more seemed fit. Just interviewed a little bit better, but it wasn't a huge difference.
I'll just say I am really glad that we had four really strong candidates. They all look really good, so it is hard to pick. And I appreciate your doing the interviews, taking that time and making that recommendation.
So if people are okay with that, I mean, there's several different things we can do here. There is the staff recommendation for the motion. Or if someone wants to do something different, we have alternative motions here. So if someone wants to make a motion.
I move to accept the recommendation and reappoint Mark Frost and appoint Mary Fetzing and Douglas Stepina to the Hood River Planning Commission. Second that.
I have a motion by Gladys and a second by Jessica to reappoint Mark Frost to the Planning Commission and appoint Mary Ruth Fetzing and Douglas Stepina also to the Planning Commission. Any additional discussion?
During the discussion, I just want to say thanks to Ben Mitchell for applying as well. Ben has great energy and love for the city, and I'm gonna certainly vote for this, but hopefully we can find a home for Ben one of these days, and I appreciate his applying too.
Yeah, thanks for
Dustin,
mentioning
if you
that.
can extend there, thank you.
Absolutely.
Anything else? All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Yes.
Any nays? Any abstentions? Chair votes aye. Thank you, Dustin. The D Hydroelectric project.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm going to have John Grimm do most of the presenting on this tonight. John is a contract project manager that the city hired on to take on this, as well as be on staff to take over additional capital projects as needed. We're very glad to have him on this particular project as he has some background in the area. This, you might remember from several years ago, we started this work, had to put it on hold when COVID started. We stopped all non-essential projects, but luckily with us coming out of the pandemic, the federal relief monies that came in, we were able to reprioritize this important project for the current fiscal year. And starting on July 1, John Grimm started off and running and now has a scope of work to present to the council for your approval.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me tonight.
Not always.
We're about to bog down.
We're on
into
task.
hydroelectricity, so
The little microphone button. Yeah, the little, yeah, there you go.
Thank you. Just a little more introduction than Will said too. I'm based out of Lyle. I've been a consulting engineer in the Gorge since 1998, I think. A long time, and it's amazing. I haven't really done a lot of work on the river because I worked on both sides of the river for a long time and east and west of Hood River, but never quite got in with you guys, and it's really nice to be here. So thanks. As you guys probably know, the city agreed to work with the Hood River County on the energy plan. And as part of that planning effort, the city is moving forward with the hydroelectric power project in D. Enline Energy specializes in this kind of work, and they did a feasibility study a few years ago that identified the fact that hydroelectric power on your potable water system is indeed technically feasible. And it's also financially feasible with some grant funding. So they did that preliminary study. Things kind of got on hold for a while because of the COVID. The city needed some help with project management work, so they brought me in, and now we're moving forward again. The first thing I did was an RFP for professional services to do the design work. We only had one response, and that was Enline Energy, which isn't surprising. It's a very specialized discipline, hydroelectric on conduit pipelines. It's unusual. And they're really probably one of the few companies that do that on the West Coast. And they've done the lion's share of all similar types of hydroelectric projects in the country. So they're very experienced with this work. The city applied to Energy Trust of Oregon for a construction grant, and we were denied. And that was simply because the feasibility study hadn't fully vetted the feasibility of the project yet. Energy Trust of Oregon wants to make sure due diligence is done and they know the project is feasible before they'll fund it. So there's a little bit of more work to do in that regard. And that's what we're doing in this first phase of Enline's project, which is finding out if the water rights are available for hydro. That's one of the key issues. There's a few other things. Is property going to be available? Things of that nature. And that will be vetted by Enline in phase one, which is really 50% design level services. And that's what we're asking the council tonight to approve, is for Will to authorize Enline to move forward with phase one of their scope of work. As part of their RFP, they submitted a scope of work and a fee estimate, which you should have in your staff report. And the scope of work, as I mentioned, phase one is for 50% design. And they'll do a lot of the licensing and regulatory work at that point to satisfy Energy Trust of Oregon. And actually, I should mention that before we even move into work with Enline, I'm going to apply to Energy Trust of Oregon for 50% of the phase one work this week. And Energy Trust did say that they think they can have an answer to us within 1 week of whether we'll get the money. It sounds like a slam dunk to me. I'm not sure if you want to condition your approval on receiving that money or not, but that's something that you should consider. Phase two of the work would be, as you know, if we get the funding, we do phase one, everything looks good, we move forward with phase two, and that's final design, services during bidding and award, and construction management. And we're not asking you for approval for that work tonight. As you can see, the phase one cost is about $120,000. That's what we're asking for approval for. Phase two would be $189,000. We think the work will be completed probably in 2023, bidding in 22-23 that winter. I don't know if you want Will to talk about the budget fiscal issues at all. It sounds like it's in your budget.
Yeah, it is. And we, we're taking the ETO money as a granted. They've been setting up meetings with me about every 3 months to ask, are you ready to get going again? We really want to fund this. So I think we are cleared we're going to get this half paid for with planning dollars from ETO. And then we'll bring the phase two portion of this contract back to you once we know that we can get construction funding to get that paid for as well.
I should mention that the financing right now for the project looks solid. The pro forma that Enline did showed an 11% return over the life of the project and payback within 10 years, assuming we get a 50% Energy Trust of Oregon grant for the entire project, which is estimated to be about $1.2 million. I think that's about all I've got. Is there any questions?
I have a question. So there were two places that originally were talked about, and one was at the corner of I believe Belmont and Frankton Road,
Mhm.
and then there was the one at D. And we owned property around the reduction boxes on Belmont Road, but not as big an area at D. So we're talking about the D project. So I wondered why we're talking about D versus Belmont.
It's a great question. It's really, in engineering geek terms, it's much more potential energy there. So there's a lot of pressure and flow at the D site, which generates much more power, which means we can have a better financial pro forma, of course, because we're getting paid for every kilowatt we generate.
Okay.
So the other site wasn't really very good in terms of financial feasibility because it just doesn't generate a lot of power.
Okay, thanks.
Sure, you bet.
I'd forgotten about that part.
Yeah.
Other questions? Eric?
So thanks for coming.
You're welcome.
Seldom do we get a no-brainer. So excited. So thank you for delivering us a no-brainer, at least in my view. But so here's my question, because I don't know a lot about these types of projects, and my question is really about the footprint for what it takes. And the reason for my question is you're probably aware there's been a lot of land use conservation up there. Should we have this be a venue for concerts? Should this be a pristine nature area? And I just wondered if we're anticipating any land use resistance, which seems to me to be at least a part of function, probably the footprint will be for the project.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a very small footprint. I'm thinking that it's going to be in a very small building, probably less than 200 square feet, and that would be on the large size. It'll be in a very, it's a very industrial area, the intersection at it's Lost Lake Road right there, and there's an old, I think it's a mill maybe, right on the river. There's also an existing water facility building for, I think it's the Odell water system. Anyways, there's a chlorination building right there right now on the banks of the river. And it's mostly kind of paved, just totally disrupted parking areas that are just not aesthetically attractive at all. And I don't think there's any real value to these areas for other uses. I'm trying to be as diplomatic as possible. I don't know if we're going to actually need to buy land or just get an easement either, so I should point that out.
Well, there are some in the community that have their eye on thinking that's something grand.
Yeah. Okay.
There's sensitivities around that. It's encouraging that we have a smaller.
Yeah, I think we can put this building in a place where it wouldn't really impact future uses of the property because it's so small.
Yeah, Dustin, I don't know if you would have any input onto this. I just add that it's going to be a bypass over top of an existing pressure reducing valve. So it's going to be we already have a box with machinery with a pressure reducing valve. And this is going to be just adding a few feet up and then going parallel with the existing line and then back into the existing line around the existing pressure reducing valve and then putting a generator on there. So as John was saying, very small footprint, nothing like a amphitheater and hotel complex.
Does it fit within the existing city easement for the water pipe and maintenance of it and stuff? So it would need.
Yeah, we have two options as Inline looked at it in the preliminary feasibility. To the south side, I believe, is owned by Von Floto family, and to the north side is owned by someone who lives in California, and we'll make contact with them. So we have two different options, so we're not stuck with one person saying yay or nay. We have two people we can contact.
I believe it's some light industrial right now.
I don't know the current zoning, but that wouldn't surprise me because it is a historical mill site.
So
And I believe there's an organics, some sort of organics processing operation there right now.
I have been talking with Hood River County Planning, and they don't anticipate any issues with approval at this location.
Would it be possible to get easement approval as part of phase one as opposed to, as much as I trust your guys' assessment of slam dunkness, and I hope that it's true and stuff, that site really is an interesting history, and I would hate to be over optimistic again and end up.
Yes, absolutely. That was, it is actually a task one deliverable is to nail down site control. And that was one of the reasons why we were denied for ETO construction grant, is because we couldn't demonstrate site control. So we will go through that process to nail that down in order to be eligible to enter into phase two.
Tim?
You had mentioned, I think you had mentioned water rights and passing. What issues are involved with that?
Well, it's hard to go into because it's incredibly complex, but for some reason, it's really weird, but the state of Oregon has a strange requirement for in-conduit hydroelectric projects where you have to show that a portion of your water right has been perfected. So it's a certificated water right. And the city has a very small portion of its total water right portfolio that's perfected. It's not enough water for this project. The rest of the city's water right is in permit status, which is perfect. It should be in permit status because the project is not complete. The city is still growing. We're going to continue to use more water as we grow. And so you don't want to perfect that water right until the growth is done. So OWRD, Oregon Water Resources Department, requires that the hydro portion of the water right be perfected. And it's a little complicated because our permit applications, or permit extension applications are in limbo. OWRD has had those extension applications for several years, and they haven't acted on them because there's a new statute in Oregon that requires a fish persistence review. And Fish and Wildlife does that review, which makes sense. They have 2 people in the entire state doing that work. I talked to one of the persons who's doing the work, and she said it would be 4 to 5 years before our permit extension applications could be reviewed. So there's a little uncertainty about whether we can perfect the water right for this project while we're in permit extension limbo. And I'm not sure what the answer to that question is yet, but one of the requirements in our proposal was that Nline bring in a certified water right examiner to do this work, to make sure we can perfect the water right as part of this project. It's a possibility that that would hold this up though. In which case, if it did, we would just pause at the end of phase 1 before moving forward.
We have our resident fish and water experts sitting right beside us here, so.
Right, yeah.
Well, I'm sure it is complicated. It seems like a potential stumbling block.
Well, I may be talking with Dan about contacting Fish and Wildlife in this regard, because technically there's a 120-day statutory review period for Fish and Wildlife to do this work. And it's already been 3 years, so we could give them a little shove if we need to.
All right, additional questions? All right.
All right, thank you.
We've got a motion on page 93.
I move to authorize, actually, I have a question first. Sorry. Will, so we would be authorizing the full 100% in this motion. Is there a reason we're doing that instead of the 50% or?
Yeah, because we are the fiscal agent. So we'll receive as revenue the grant from ETO and then expend all of the money ourselves.
Okay, great. Then I move to authorize the city manager to execute an agreement with Nline Energy to perform design and construction management services for the D Bridge Hydroelectric project in an amount not to exceed $120,500 with a 10% project contingency.
Megan's made a motion and Eric has seconded that motion to authorize the city manager to execute an agreement with Enline Energy to perform design and construction management services for the D Bridge Hydroelectric project in the amount not to exceed $120,500 with a 10% project contingency. Additional discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Nays? Abstentions? Chair votes aye. Thank you. Exciting. All right, Riverside Drive Sanitary Sewer Project.
I have Public Works Director Mark Janik here to speak to that.
Good evening. We've discussed sanitary sewer projects. As you may remember, last winter, November, about a couple of months ago, we had a emergency repair on Riverside Drive. It was the same pipe. This is a sanitary sewer pipe that runs, there's a force main that runs from downtown to a lift station behind the St. Clair station. And then this effluent then goes underneath the embankment at 2nd Street, continues on to the sanitary sewer plant. So this is really the last pipe that the effluent is in before it gets to the plant. There was the pipe underneath Riverside Drive and partially in to the east collapsed, and we had to go in there and replace it. For a number of years, we've had some issues at the plant where rocks and debris have come into the headworks and have damaged some of our equipment. And when we saw that this pipe was collapsed, we immediately thought, well, maybe this is the source of the rocks. What we found was we televised the pipe after we fixed it, and we found that farther east in the pipe and a little bit to the west, the pipe is in really bad shape. So we're hoping that this is the source of the debris that's coming into the plant. There's another project in our CAP, it's been in there for a few years, called the Core Screen Project. That project was supposed to create a screen and then screen out this debris. So we're hoping that this project is going to solve that problem. What this project is, it goes from where the Riverside pipe collapsed last year, and you go east to 2nd Street embankment. It's this open pipe, open ground, should be relatively easy, hopefully to replace. We'll have to do some bypass pumping while we're putting this pipe in place. So there'll be a tanker out there. The contractor will be pumping into the tanker and then running it to the plant. But if you look at the schedule, this is hopefully going to be finished by beginning of November. So hopefully this is going to solve our debris problem. At least it's going to fix a pipe that absolutely has to get worked on and get fixed. The bid was great. We had 4 bidders. This bid is $79,000. We had a lot more money attached to this project. One reason why is because this project is not going to go underneath the embankment to where the lift station is. We're going to stop short. Hopefully we're going to solve the problem and save some money. If we have to, then we'll then continue under the 2nd Street embankment. But we're hoping that we don't have to do that. Any questions?
That sounds like a messy thing to have to deal with while you're working on it.
It's
2 weeks worth of doing that, or how long?
It'll probably take 2 weeks. Hopefully just take 2 weeks.
But you're trying to do it now before winter because just there's less moisture this time of year and would it make
Well,
it easier?
there is, the rains are going to be coming, but we just want to get the pipe fixed. Once we saw it last year, we could have done an emergency then to do the rest of the pipe, but we thought it was going to be more expensive than it was, that we had put in the 5-year budget. So we're just going to try to get it done. It's just one of those things that needs to get done.
Mark?
I just have one question because I can't help myself. A 10-inch pipe feeding a 12-inch pipe, just the logic behind that was, is that, I wonder why.
The 10-inch pipe that's underneath Second Street.
It looks like you're gonna put a new 10-inch pipe into a new 12-inch.
Like, see, the 10-inch pipe is the one that goes underneath. Looking at the capital improvement information sheet. We're not doing the entire project. That's on the information sheet.
Gotcha.
We're only doing the part that's the new 12-inch pipe. That's the part that we're doing.
Right, under the green part.
And the reason why there's a smaller pipe is because there's a force main that comes into this and then it becomes gravity.
I knew there was a good answer, I just.
Additional questions?
I was just gonna say it'd be great if we don't have to do the course screen project then.
Absolutely. The course training is extremely complicated and to design that, this is very tough to do. So hopefully we will do it.
Yeah, seems like fix it before the rocks get there.
Absolutely.
If there's any more question, there's a motion on page 112.
We authorize the city manager to approve the contract with GD Construction in the amount of $79,952.60 for all work associated with removal and replacement of the sanitary sewer pipe attaching from the Second Street embankment to the west side of Riverside Drive as indicated in the attached documents.
Second.
And that was about my glasses. I'm just
Tim's made a motion and Megan has seconded that motion to authorize the city manager to approve a contract with James Dean Construction, the amount of $79,952.60 for all work associated with the removal and replacement of a sanitary sewer pipe stretching from the Second Street embankment to the west side of Riverside Drive as indicated in the attached documents. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? Chair votes aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Resolution 2021-14, volunteer expense reimbursements.
Yeah, Honorable Mayor and City Council, this is coming from the council discussion at the previous meeting during council call about expanding our pre-existing reimbursement for childcare expenses for volunteers who sit on our boards, committees, and commissions, and making that so that we'll reimburse any direct expenses so that those folks can participate fully in all of our different volunteer options and ways for people to lend their perspective and their help with decision making. Things that this might be expanded to include is maybe people who need help with a bus pass, gas reimbursement, at IRS mileage rates, maybe even a headset so that they can hear a virtual meeting with kind of the commotion of a busy household in the background. The previous resolution set a cap of $12 per hour for childcare expenses. This resolution, because it's broader, just sets a $100 per meeting cap. And that's not to really be a functional cap because we're going to directly reimburse for real expenses that people pay. So there's no one who's going to be making money off of this. I just wanted to have something so that if someone wanted to have an outlandish claim like buying a new mountain bike so that they could get to a meeting, we would have a way to stop that kind of any of that activity. But I really don't expect that overall this will be a significant budgetary impact, but it may make the difference for a few individuals. So have the draft resolution for your discussion, and you can choose to modify it or pass it tonight.
Great. Thank you, Will, for bringing this back to us right away. Appreciate that. So we've got a resolution and I don't, does anyone have any questions, comments on the resolution?
I was just gonna say, one, thank you to Councilor Rivera for bringing this up. And then also for Will, when you and I chatted, we talked about, because some of Councilor Rivera's question was about a general stipend, and we talked about how that's gonna need more research, so we could put that on the list of things to consider when we do the council goal setting. So anyway, I was just gonna say thank you to Will for putting that on that list, just to reflect where that ended up.
Thanks. Any questions?
I just want to make a comment before we make a motion. I too appreciate that we're talking about this and making an actionable item out of barriers that have been presented to us from our constituents and their inability to be able to join some of these important planning task force and whatnot. So I appreciate Will, you taking the time to just move this along so that we can hopefully address some of these barriers to have more input from our community members. I move to adopt resolution 2021-14, authorizing reimbursement for direct volunteer expenses incurred to attend assigned board, commission, or committee meetings.
I will second.
Gladys has made the motion. Megan has seconded to adopt resolution 2021-14, authorizing reimbursement for direct volunteer expenses incurred to attend assigned board, commission, or committee meetings. Additional discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Opposed? Abstaining? Chair votes aye. All right. Housing Development Advisory Services Contract Amendment.
Senior Planner Kevin Liberty, Project Manager on the 780 Rand Road Development, is going to present this item.
Thank you, Mayor and councilors. The cover sheet for this item is on page 132 of tonight's packet. After the city purchased the property at 780 Rand Road for affordable housing development, we published a request for proposals in July of 2020 to solicit firms to provide housing development advisory services. In October of 2020, staff brought a recommendation to you to establish a contract with Leland Consulting Group to provide this service in conjunction with Herbsworks and DDB Consulting Services. The contract tasked Leland with preparing development alternatives and also preparing a request for qualifications to be issued to the development community for disposition and development of the site. At that time, Leland made it clear to us that after completing the tasks in that contract, they would be available to assist the city with other services if needed, including negotiating with the developer. At the council meeting 2 weeks ago, we discussed narrowing a group of seven prospective development teams down to 2. And last week, we issued a request for proposals for affordable housing and attainable housing development, to Bridge Housing Corporation and Community Development Partners. Leland expects to complete the tasks under the current contract by the end of this month. Proposals from the 2 development teams are expected to be delivered by October 25th. Staff will review those proposals, and we expect to bring a recommendation for preferred development team to the council in November. Before identifying the preferred development team and beginning negotiations, staff recommends amending the contract with Leland Consulting Group so that we can continue working together on this project. Leland's team has a great deal of experience working on complex development proposals, including public-private partnerships, and their continued participation will maintain continuity throughout the development process. Draft contract amendments are presented in your packet. You're going to see amendment number 2, and a scope of work is outlined in Exhibit E that includes assistance with review of development proposals, including facilitating interviews, guidance during the due diligence period this autumn into next spring, including financial analysis, review of development agreements, ongoing negotiations between the city and the developer, as well as optional tasks, including additional urban design work and assisting with funding strategies. The contract amendment would authorize up to $55,000 through June 30th of 2022, resulting in a total contract amount not to exceed $115,000. There's a suggested motion on the cover sheet to authorize the city manager to amend the personal service contract with Leland Consulting. Anybody have any questions? Councilor Saunders?
Yeah, sorry, I just, budget-wise, it seems like we're not budgeting for the optional tasks. Is that correct?
The optional tasks, as I understand it, are included in the $55,000 amount.
Okay,
So it's up to 55K.
I got it. Thank you. And I have a question, financial question too. So was this in our budget for last year? I cannot remember.
And Mayor, this will be paid, well, kind of all the project expenses, so including some of the remediation work and environmental work there on the site has all been paid out of the Affordable Housing Reserve for now. And then a construction excise tax will be available thereafter as we continue, if needed, to continue until we build out a full sort of pro forma for this project.
Okay, thank you. Mark?
Kevin, did we anticipate consultant help with these next phases at the beginning, and then now we're just starting seeing the implementation to it? Or did we think we were gonna do it with staff, and now we're going, oh, it would really be nice?
From my perspective, at the front end, I thought it would be helpful to work with a consultant through the completion of the project. But we started with the advisory service. Can you help us put together development alternatives? And that initial solicitation to the development community didn't get, that contract just didn't get beyond that period. So here we're kind of at that moment where we need to decide, do we want to continue to work with Leland? Would you like staff to do this work alone, going forward, or should we select another consulting firm to assist?
Yeah, I think that this is a completely different animal. There's a lot of different aspects to it that the planning department doesn't do. It's just a whole new aspect of the planning.
Yes.
It feels like. Other questions? All right.
I move to authorize the city manager to amend the personal services contract with Leland Consulting Group for development of affordable housing at 780 Rand Road for a total contract amount not to exceed $115,000.
Second.
Jessica made a motion and Megan has seconded to authorize the city manager to amend the personal services contract with Leland Consulting Group for development of affordable housing at 780 Rand Road for a total contract amount not to exceed $115,000. Additional discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Chair votes aye. Appreciate it. All right. We have a important day coming up in a couple weeks. Oh. Thank you, Megan. I got it here somewhere. And in fact, it's a day we would normally, meet. But we'll be meeting the next day after that because we have this important day coming up. And so I've done this as a resolution in the past, but it's really a proclamation. And other places are doing this as a proclamation. So I'm going to do this today because this is our last meeting until what is Indigenous Peoples Day. So this is a proclamation declaring the second Monday in October as Indigenous Peoples Day and encourage other institutions to recognize the day, reaffirming the city's commitment to promote the prosperity and well-being of Hood River's American Indian, Alaska Native, and Indigenous community. Whereas the city of Hood River recognizes that the Indigenous people of the lands that would be later known as the Americas have occupied these lands since time immemorial. And whereas the city recognizes the fact that Hood River is built upon the homelands and villages and traditional use areas of the Native Americans of this region. And whereas the city of Hood River has a responsibility to oppose the systemic racism towards Indigenous peoples of the United States, which perpetuates high rates of poverty and income inequality, exacerbating disproportionate health, education, and social crises. And whereas Indigenous Peoples Day was first proposed in 1977 by a delegation of Native nations to the United Nations sponsored International Conference on Discrimination Against Indigenous Populations of the Americas. And whereas the United States endorsed the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, called the Declaration, on December 16th, 2010. And the Declaration recognizes that Indigenous peoples have suffered from historic injustices as the result of, inter alia, their colonization and dispossession of their lands, territories, and resources. And whereas Article 15 of the Declaration recognizes the rights of Indigenous peoples to the dignity and diversity of their cultures, traditions, histories, and aspirations, which shall be appropriately reflected in education and public information, and places an obligation on states to take effective measures in consultation and cooperation with the Indigenous peoples concerned to combat prejudice and eliminate discrimination and to promote tolerance, understanding, and good relations among Indigenous peoples and all other segments of society. And now, therefore, I, Kate McBride, Mayor of the City of Hood River, Oregon, recognize Indigenous Peoples Day on the second Monday in October, and be it further resolved that Indigenous Peoples Day shall be used to reflect upon the ongoing struggles of Indigenous people on this land, and to celebrate the thriving culture and value that Indigenous peoples add to our city. And be it further resolved that the City of Hood River encourages other businesses, organizations, and public institutions to recognize Indigenous Peoples Day. In witness thereof, and with the consent of the City Council and the City of Hood River, I will hereto set my hand on this, the 27th day of September, 2021. Thank you. Sometimes I have a hard time reading that. It's emotional for me. All right. Council call.
I have nothing to say, Mayor.
Mark?
I would just note that a study came out this week that showed that there were humans in North America more than 20,000 years ago, as opposed to the previous guess of 15. So even goes back further.
Yeah.
That's all. Nothing for me, thank you.
Megan?
2 meetings quickly report out on. The Affordable Housing Task Force had its first meeting, oh gosh, a couple weeks ago. I've lost track of time. But strong engagement, intro meetings. So definitely just started out reviewing basic housing data, the project goals, the process, the group charter. Everyone kind of getting to know each other, shared their hopes and concerns for housing. Really great, super strong engagement from the whole group. Definitely a good variety of thoughts and issues and concerns and desires, but definitely all really invested in addressing the housing issue. So I think it'll be a really good group moving forward. So that's exciting. Not a ton of data to bring to you guys yet, but a great start. And then also the Police Facility Subcommittee did have a meeting last week. It's Monday, so yeah, last week, which I think was a really good initial conversation between the city and the county. And we are all going to be reviewing the RFP to make sure we're all kind of on the same page for a vision and scope of work to move forward. So I think we should have something to bring to the full council in a couple weeks.
And the county commissioners were hip to it, and both the police chief and the sheriff were, so everyone in the room was in line, lined up with the same concepts, which was really good.
Yeah, I think it was a positive.
So when you say an RFP, you mean an RFP to do actually some official work with someone that's leading the process, or?
So this was, and Will can correct me, but basically we had an RFP that staff had drafted, 9 months ago, that was basically to take the next steps of do a combined facility space needs and then start looking at sites. And so it's what we're working on is making sure that we all have a shared vision of what the space needs are. Is it just, sheriff and courthouse and police, or does it include these community other groups or some sort of flex space, and just make sure that we all know what we're signing up for. But I think big picture, yeah, county was very excited to, and I think city obviously as well, excited to work together and figure out a path forward.
Yeah, Mayor, maybe I'll just clarify, nothing new that this council hasn't already seen in a public meeting. It was the last staff report that you got on this item when we decided to create this subcommittee. And so it's just reviewing that work and sort of reorienting to where we left off.
Right, Stu, anything to add on that?
Nothing else to add?
That's it.
Okay, Tim?
Thanks, Mayor. I did want to just mention that I did follow up with a couple of staff regarding the climate resiliency work. And we just had a general discussion about, what they're trying to do. And they asked me some questions about some of the things they're trying to do. And so we just pretty much resolved that we would coordinate going forward. I'll just keep everybody involved, up to date about how that goes as we engage.
Great, thanks. Gladys?
Nothing too much to add. I just want to thank you, Mayor, for bringing this forward, the proclamation to recognize October 2nd as Indigenous Peoples' Day. And I truly hope that this does encourage other businesses and local organizations to recognize this day as well.
Great. All right. We have an executive session this evening. So I'm going to read our script for that. The city council will now meet in executive session pursuant to Oregon Revised Statute 192.660 2A to consider the employment of a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual agent. Representatives of the news media and designated staff are allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made nor final action taken in executive session. The executive session is anticipated to last 20 or 30 minutes. At the end of the executive session, City Council will come out of executive session and announce a decision if one is made. All right, so Jen will put us in our suspense mode for the executive session.
anyone wants to visit, they can, otherwise.
All right, we are adjourned from executive session. And we are back in our regular meeting again now, starting at 7:35.
All right, I'm very happy to make a motion to ask the mayor to complete the employment agreement with Abigail Elder to be our next city manager for the city of Hood River.
Second?
Mark has made a motion and Jessica has seconded that motion to allow the mayor, myself, to sign the contract with Abigail Elder to become our new city manager. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstentions? Nays? Chair votes yes. All right. I think that is, does anyone have anything else before we completely adjourn? All right, at 7:36, we're going to adjourn city council meeting. Next meeting is Tuesday, October 12th. Okay, all right.